guys, it's Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a slightly controversial video because I'm going to be talking about some unpopular opinions regarding writing YA characters. So I know that the majority of you write young adult books, and so some of these you definitely might disagree with, hence why they are controversial or unpopular opinions. But I've been thinking about YA characters recently as I just finished editing What Lies Above again, and then also as I've been going through another work in progress and as I begin to write the second book in the What Lies Above series. And so I've just been thinking about young adult characters, and as I've been getting beta feedback and feedback from a lot of different people, a few of these things actually have been popping up, and so I've just been thinking about them, and this video is by no means, just as a preface, meant to attack any one opinion. I'm just going to be sharing some opinions about writing YA characters that I think are often misrepresented among authors, or at least I don't see them very often, and I definitely know that there are other writers that feel this way because I've talked about this with some of my critique partners and with some of my writer friends, and they agree with a lot of these opinions. But in general, I feel like the YA market and characters in YA books don't often reflect some of these things, and so I just wanted to talk about it because A, it's just something that I find really interesting and fascinating. B, it has to do with What Lies Above, and since the book is going to be coming out in a few months, it's not so much that I want to defend my writing choices, but it's just that I wanted to come on here and talk about it in relation a little bit to my debut What Lies Above, and then also just as an encouragement to you guys that you don't always have to write characters that are cookie cutter, that fit into what most characters in the young adult market are. You can write characters that are different, that have personalities that are different, that have traits that are different. And so I'm going to be getting into some of those things today and talking about some more unpopular opinions of things that I feel like don't really appear a lot in young adult books. So there are two main things that I want to talk about, and you probably saw them from the thumbnail picture because I put both of them in there. But the first thing is strong female characters, and then the second thing is writing like age appropriate characters in young adult. Most ages for characters within young adult, for main characters at least, is like 16 to 18 tops normally. But I'm going to be talking about ages of characters and maturity as well. So I guess there's like three things, but two of them are kind of tied up together. Strong female characters, ages of characters, and maturity of characters. Alright, so let's start off with maturity and ages of characters, and then we'll talk about strong female characters. So for the ages and maturity of characters, like I said, I'm going to kind of bind these up into one. There was a comment that I got from some beta feedback previously on What Lies Above, and again, this is not at all against any feedback that I've ever gotten. I appreciate all the feedback, and readers are completely entitled to their opinion. It's just that this got me thinking about the subject of maturity in characters, and that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So again, this is not against that beta or any feedback that I've ever received. This is just like thought-provoking and something that I started thinking about in young adult books and in my own book after I saw this comment. Basically, the comment was that one of my point of view characters, Eva, well actually both of them, both Eva and Eli, didn't act their age, or that they responded to situations in a, I don't know if the word they used was immature, but I'm going to use that for the sake of the video, in an immature way. Basically that they were not acting their age and how someone their age would respond. Now, Eva is 16 in the first book and 17 in the rest of the series, and then Eli is 21, which we'll get into ages of characters and not having cookie cutter ages as well. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. So going back to maturity, my characters are 16 and 21. And so some of the feedback that I got from a particular beta was that Eva and Eli often respond to things in ways that are not age appropriate. So not in a way that someone who is 17 or 21 would respond. Specifically for Eva, it was more so that Eva seems like a middle grade character, someone who maybe would be like 14 or 15 and not 16 or 17. And then for Eli, the comment was that he often acts out emotionally in ways that seem emotionally immature for someone who's 21, that he doesn't have enough control over his emotions. So those were like the two main things that came up, and so I really started thinking about this because it by no means like hurt my feelings or anything with that feedback, because again, readers are going to have all kinds of opinions about the book, and this is actually the first time that that particular thing has come up. There has been some feedback with What Is Above before about just like character arc and character maturity, particularly with Eva, but never anything really about the maturity or immaturity of the characters. So I thought that was really interesting and an interesting insight, and so I started thinking about it a lot. And the reason that I wanted to get on this video and talk about it is because I think that sometimes, and this is where the unpopular opinion comes in, I think that sometimes young adult books portray characters completely outside of their actual age. I asked my dad the other day, just because I was curious about this, how old he thought Katniss Everdeen was in The Hunger Games, which he's only seen the movies, he hasn't read the books, but I asked him just out of curiosity, how old do you think Katniss Everdeen is? And he said 25. And so whenever I told him that she was 16, he was like blown away. He could not believe that she was supposed to be 16. She just acted way more mature, in his opinion, than a 16-year-old would. Now, granted, my parents have 4 kids. I have 3 siblings, and they've raised all of us and been through all those years. So my dad was like, no way, I don't think a 16-year-old would act like that. Again, that's his personal opinion, but I just thought it was interesting that he said that, because in my personal opinion, which I don't know if this is unpopular or not, but I feel like it probably is, in my opinion, I feel like young adult characters are very unrealistic for their age. I was talking to one of my critique partners about this, about ages and maturity of characters, and I said when I was 16, which is how old Eva is in What Lies Above, I would have reacted to scenarios completely differently than the majority of young adult characters do. If I had gone into the Hunger Games at 16, I absolutely would have died in like 5 seconds or less. And I think that that depends upon your personality. I think that there's some people who at 16 are way more mature. I think there's some people that act like they're 12 when they're 16, and there's some people that act like they're 20 when they're 16. And I think that like emotionally and intellectually at 16 I was probably mature for my age, but I was super shy. I was not very confident, and so if I had been thrown into the scenarios that most young adult characters are thrown into, you know, wastelands, Hunger Games, wars, traumatic situations, genuinely, if I, as a 16-year-old, had gone into those scenarios, I probably would not have reacted how most young adult characters do, which is, you know, to be an assassin, a spy, to just go into a war and conquer everything, save the world from corrupt governments. Like, there's so many things in young adult books that I feel like characters who are supposed to be 16 and 17, that's not realistic, and I get why characters are written that way. I mean, I write young adult books. My characters are between the ages normally of 16 and 17. That's generally the age that I write, and they do things that I probably would not have done, because again, every personality is different, and so some characters who are 16 and 17 could do those things. They could be assassins or spies whenever I wouldn't have been. However, I think that it's important to also have young adult characters that are realistic for those people who know that there's no way that they would have been able to do that. And for me as a 16-year-old, sometimes it would have been nice to just read about a character that I actually related to and that reacted to trauma in the same way that I would have. And so whenever I wrote What Lies Above, one of the things that I really wanted for Eva was to have her on this journey and to have a character arc for her that was very, very dramatic. In the beginning of the story, basically her whole life has been planned out and given to her. She's been safe, she's been secluded, and she's never had to fight for anything really. And suddenly she's thrown into this brand new world of war and lies and betrayal, and she has to survive, and she has to survive alone. And so I wanted her character arc to go from someone who had never had to fight to someone that suddenly knows what she's fighting for. And in order to do that, I made her a character that sometimes does seem weak in the standards of most young adult characters. She doesn't wield swords, and she doesn't go into wars and just kill people fearlessly. She's scared, and she cries, and she's afraid. But in those moments when she's afraid, she's also strong. And that is going to move into kind of the strong female characters, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I think that when I was writing her, I wanted her to seem realistic to someone like me at 16 who would have reacted that way. And if you want to know more about What Lies Above, you can go read the blurb, but basically one of the points that thrusts her into this brand new world is that she's exiled from her city alone. And she has to survive, and she's never had to do that before. And so the way that she reacts to that situation is in strength, but it's also with fear, and she doesn't know what she's going to do, and she doubts herself a lot. And she brings up points throughout the book about what strength is and whether or not she's strong and feeling like she's weak. And I did that with the purpose of showing my readers that you can be strong in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't just require you to be an assassin or a thief or a spy or something where you are constantly putting yourself in danger. Like, there's a lot of different kinds of strength, and particularly whenever I talk about strong female characters, there's a lot of different ways that women can be strong, and I don't think that they always have to be, you know, kicking butt and wielding swords and daggers in order to be classified as strong. Because young adult books often portray characters who are 16 and 17 as acting like someone in their 20s, I think that it often looks like a character who acts realistic to their age at 16 or 17 seems younger, which might be the case with the feedback that I got from that beta. Whether that person had grown up with a different lifestyle than me, or a lifestyle where they had to be really mature at 16, or if it's just from reading a lot of books where 16 and 17-year-olds take on responsibilities and roles that someone their age probably never would. I don't really know what the case was, but I can say that people are complex and people act lots of different ways at lots of different ages. And so I think that it's important for young adult books to reflect that. Now, I know that no one wants to read about a whiny character that is not proactive and that has no goal. So in that case, yes, we want to write characters that are that have strength and that have goals, and they have a reason for doing the things that they do, and there's something that's driving them in the plot. But I think that at the same time, it's okay to have your characters react to things with fear. It's okay to have your characters cry. It's okay to have your characters not know what to do next. And in the case of Eli, my 21-year-old other protagonist's point of view, he often reacts to things in a very emotionally charged way, because his story arc is like night and day from Eva's. Eva is very sensitive and sweet, and she's been sheltered, and Eli is completely the opposite. He's grown up in the heart of the war. He's grown up having to harden himself to survive and to protect his family. And so because of that, he has a lot of anger, and he reacts from his anger, from that point of anger. He reacts in a very emotional way. And so sometimes he does react to scenarios in ways that are super emotional. And so it might seem like an immature reaction. It might seem like he doesn't have a handle on his emotions, but I can say from someone who's in their 20s that I don't always have a handle on my emotions either. When I'm really stressed or upset or angry, I'll cry, you know, and I think that it's normal to have emotions, and I think that for me, again, possibly unpopular opinion, but I think it's okay to have your characters reflect realistic and complex emotions, and to not always have a handle on that, and to sometimes act out in ways that are just raw and real, because that will connect with a lot of your readers who know what that's like. And for me, and for my critique partner that I was talking to about, you know, maturity of characters, it would have connected with us a lot to have a character like Eva who was scared and who doesn't think that they can step out and do that. Because I remember being 16, 17, I was about to go off to college, and I was super shy, and I really struggled with anxiety at that time. And it seemed to me like the world was about to get so big going off to college, and I was so small, and I was afraid. I didn't want to step out into this big world and have to suddenly be a lot more confident and take on a lot of things that I had never had to face. And so that was scary. And to me, in my 17-year-old brain, that was a very, very, very small, like, little thing that I could compare to something that a young adult character would face, because obviously when I was 17, I wasn't going into war. But for my character Eva, stepping out, being exiled from her city, and suddenly having to face this all alone, it's kind of a similar feeling to what I felt at 17 going off to college. And so I think that a reader can take what a young adult character is facing and relate it to their own personal experiences. And that's why for me, I really wanted to portray Eva as someone that I would have connected to at that age. Okay, moving on to strong female characters. I kind of started touching on it when I was talking about Eva and how women are complex and they have a lot of different strengths. So I'm going to move into that now, specifically talking about females. Now, I have a female and a male main character, so obviously I could talk about this from both perspectives, but I feel like female characters get a lot more attention about this, and I think that the term strong female characters is used way more frequently than strong male characters, so I'm going to specifically talk about that. What I really want to focus on is the fact that sometimes strength is very cookie cutter in young adult books. There's been a ton of books. I can name a ton. There's a lot on my shelf right now. If you think about Throne of Glass is a big one where a female character is an assassin, but there's a lot of other books where girls are often portrayed as strong only if they're wielding some kind of weapon or doing some kind of super dangerous job where they're taking life or thieving or doing something that's highly dangerous. I think that that is often portrayed as strength. And so again, using Eva as an example, my main character Eva, she is strong in totally different ways. There's a scene in the book where somebody that she's with has to kill something else. I'm trying not to spoil. Has to kill something else, and Eva cannot even look. She has to turn away because she doesn't like the sight of killing. And I feel like that is completely opposite to what a lot of young adult female characters do. Most of the time, they're right in there doing it themselves. And so I think that, again, it's important to have different characters, to have complex characters that don't always act the same way. And I think it's important for young adult authors to have female characters in their books that are complex. I think that there was a few years ago something that went around on Twitter that was talking about this stigma of strong female characters who only wield swords, and there were people who were saying strong females can wield swords and wear dresses. There's no one thing that defines female strength. And I've seen in my real life, I've seen women who are strong because they go to war, and I've seen women who are strong because they raise their families and they go through a lot of heartbreak and a lot of hard things just in life that are not necessarily as explosive as something like a war, but they're still really hard and it still takes a lot of strength to get through them. So I think that, again, using that, taking it back to young adult books, I think that women can go through a lot of things in books that reflect strength. And there's even a scene in What Lies Above where Eva and another character talk about strength, and she's really vulnerable talking about how she feels like she's weak and powerless. And he says to her that sometimes quiet strength is the most amazing kind of strength and the most beautiful kind of strength, because it's not loud and in your face. And it's amazing, and I think that it deserves to be recognized and it deserves to be in books as well. Not to say, again, not to bash on female characters in young adult books who are assassins, who are thieves, who are spies, because I've written characters in books that are as well. But I think that we should have a wide variety of female characters in books that react to things differently, that have different emotions, that have different occupations, that have different goals, and that have different kinds of strengths. Okay, and then I realized that I kind of overlooked ages of characters a bit. I talked about that, but I didn't really hit on what I wanted to say about Eli, who's 21. So I'm gonna just go back for a second and talk about that before I close out the video. One thing that I really want to say about ages of characters is that I've gotten a comment a lot about the fact that Eli in What Lies Above is 21, because most young adult books, the oldest that a character is like 18, maybe 19, because I know, even though I haven't read this book, I think that in A Court of Thorns and Roses, the main character is 19, and so you can kind of get away with that. But then again, Sarah J. Maas was already highly popular, so she could probably get away with a lot of things that debut authors couldn't. But most of the time, characters in young adult books are like 16 to 19 max. So me having a 21-year-old character as a point of view in my book was incredibly risky, and it often got some backlash from betas who thought that that was too old for a character. Now, I will say, without spoiling anything, there's a very good reason why Eli is 21, and it cannot be changed. Like, I cannot lower his age. He has to be that age because of his plot and his story arc and his timeline. However, I think that even if there is not necessarily a direct relation in the plot to why the character is that old, one thing that I really love about being an indie author is that I can sometimes do things that in traditional publishing would not be allowed. I don't know how a traditional publisher would react to me having a 21-year-old main character. I probably would have been required to lower the age, but as an indie author, I don't have to, and I love that freedom. But I also know that there are some things in young adult books that you don't want to just throw out the window. And so I would often associate what was popular in the YA market with what was good. And I would throw out ideas that I had about characters or about plot because I thought that it didn't fit in what was required of me as a YA author. And so although there are definitely genre standards that you should still follow, and although, you know, I'm sure that you've probably heard the saying, like, there are rules in the YA market, or there are rules in writing in general, and once you get the craft down, you can start breaking them, but when you start, you should follow the rules. That's That's something that I used to hear a lot whenever I was a younger writer. And there is some truth in that. I do think there are definitely craft related things that are good for you to follow. However, I think that if we really get always like bogged down and constantly wondering if we're doing the right thing in a book, it can kill creativity really fast. And I've noticed that in my writing journey as well, that whenever I started worrying so much about whether what I was writing was acceptable, I started just losing the creativity because I was just trying to mold my book into every other book I've seen in the YA market. And if you notice, the books that are the most famous and popular, like Harry Potter and Hunger Games, and those are the books that often break the expectations. They often have things that are surprising and unexpected, and that's what people love. And so I think that if we're so scared to do something that's different, that we might lose something that's great. And so for me, having a 21-year-old main character, it works for the story, it works for his timeline, it works for the plot. And there's a lot of readers that have said it didn't bother them at all, and then there's some readers that said, I think this is too risky. Ultimately, as the author, I've decided that I like it and I think it works, and so I'm keeping it, which again, I appreciate all feedback, but ultimately I had to sift through it and decide what do I want and what is good for the story that I want to write. And so I decided to make my character 21. Thankfully, I'm an indie author and I can do that, and hopefully, it's well received by readers, but I know in my heart that it's good for the story, and I love his storyline, I love his age, and I think that for his age, he reacts in a wonderful way. And I know a ton of people that are his age that are 21, and actually this is something that I was going to talk about in another video, but I'm going to go ahead and say it now. I am 21, and most of you probably don't know that because a lot of you probably think that I'm older, but I'm 21 myself. So when I was writing Eli, I really channeled a lot of perhaps how I would react if I was in his situation, which hopefully I will never be because he has a really traumatic storyline, but I thought about what would I do if I was in this situation. And even though Eli acts nothing like me and his character is completely unlike me, in fact Eva's a lot more like me, even though I'm nothing like him, I tried to imagine what it would be like to be in that scenario. And I realized that, hey, I don't have total emotional control over myself. Like I said, when I'm stressed or upset or angry, I cry, I react out of emotion. That's normal as humans. And so with Eli, I wanted him to be a realistic character, and he goes through a lot, and so he reacts accordingly, and very emotionally at times because he's going through a trauma, and I think that a lot of people have experienced trauma, and it's totally okay to grieve and to react in a way that is appropriate to the situation and to cry. And so I think that him being a male character doesn't change that at all. I think that it's important to show male characters being complex, just like it's important to show female characters. So yeah, age of characters, it's a tricky situation, but I think that if you genuinely feel like the age of the character is warranted and needed in the story, go for it. If you're traditionally published and they require you to change it, that's one thing. But if you're an indie author, you have a little bit more freedom to play around with some of the rules of writing that would typically be more enforced in traditional publishing. So I'm grateful for that. But I just want to encourage you, don't try to fit your book into a mold, because the books that are going to connect with readers are those that are fresh and that take chances and that take risks and that are willing to step outside of the box and to show a story and show characters that are complex and different than what readers have had before. And so hopefully What Lies Above does that in some ways, and hopefully, the characters are realistic, but I know that in the end they're not going to connect with every reader, and that's okay too. So yeah, I think that is all I have for you guys today. Please let me know down below in the comments. I really, really want to know what you think about these three things: ages of characters, maturity of characters, and strong female characters. I know that these are kind of like controversial topics sometimes, and there's a lot of different opinions, and perhaps my opinion is unpopular about these things and about the risks that you should take, but I would love to hear what you guys think. So let me know down below in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos about writing and books and my journey with publishing What Lies Above, which will be out on August 29th of this year. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye!